I'm Simon Johnson, and I've got something brilliantly new for my lunch break, and you're invited. Join me, plus an awesome special guest each week on The Late Lunch, where we'll be discussing everything from delicious lunchtime recipes to amazing customer stories. Let's see who will be joining me this week. Hello, good afternoon everybody, and welcome to The Late Lunch with me, Simon Johnson, where we take a unique view into the world of CX, which is often a very nebulous and difficult area to try and navigate the waters of. We bring you the best guests in the world, in the CX world, to come and try and understand and break down some of these areas, bring some clarity and some simplicity to what we're trying to talk about. And today, it's actually been quite a few weeks since our last edition, but today we have a fabulous guest who I'll introduce very shortly. So as well as working with our guests, we also have the CX trivia quiz, which I have here, and we'll be looking at that a little bit later. No pressure. And of course, we'll take lots of questions from our audience as well. Thank you everybody for joining us. We've had thousands and thousands and thousands of views of all of the coverage and sessions, so it's been really, really amazing. So in a world of abundant choices and means and companies and ways of purchasing, what we're trying to do here is to break this conversation down into small nuggets where we can sort of understand how to build the perfect kind of CX strategy, basically. Often we're talking about big, large, cumbersome organizations with millions and millions of dollars to spend, basically, and lots of highly qualified staff producing these complex workflows. But actually, it's not all about that. Certainly at Freshworks, we have a huge number of customers in the SMB space, and this is exactly the area where we feel we can get CX right. It will grow into something much bigger. So today is all about CX within the SMB world. And we're joined by an absolutely fantastic guest today, Rebecca Brown from ThinkWell, actually joint founder and joint CEO of ThinkWell, to try and break some of this down. Good afternoon, Rebecca.
Hi, Simon. Thank you very much for such a lovely introduction. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
No problem at all. Do you want to give us a quick intro into ThinkWell and what you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. So ThinkWell is a customer experience and sales consultancy that I co-founded with my husband and partner, Dan, almost 2 years ago now, just before the pandemic hit. And we help SMEs and startups to grow the right way by putting the customer right at the heart of everything that they're doing. And that can look so different depending on which business we work with, but it's really enjoyable. And I was just chatting to one of your colleagues actually about having a client at the moment where everybody in the organization is so excited and enthusiastic about the customer. So that makes it just really special.
Yeah, and we are exactly that company. And like I was saying to you earlier, I joined a company 7 years ago, and we were only a small company at the time, 100 people, but it was absolutely about how do we make that agent and customer experience amazing? Because that allows you then, the agents want to use the product, the customers want to use the product, it's easy to evaluate the product, and that's how you generate more and more interest. And we were just touching upon how much easier it is for these larger companies to sort of spend this money and get the right budget. But what I'm keen to sort of look at here is, how do we keep customers? How do we get new customers? How do we focus our strategy around CX for small businesses? So let's just sort of think this one through then. So what are your kind of broad brush views then around SMB and CX and strategy?
Yeah, so I think for me, there is never a better time to consider your customer experience strategy than when you're small and you've kind of got those growth plans, you know where you want to get to, but maybe you're not quite there yet. If you can actually think ahead of time and plan for that growth that you want to have happen, then you can start building in processes that are actually scalable and achievable as you grow. And I think that sadly, not enough smaller businesses are even really aware of customer experience as a strategy that they need. So they don't necessarily have the people in place in the organization to lead on that. They don't necessarily have the kind of desire to achieve it. And so they don't think about it until they're much, much larger. And at that point, that's as you say, that's when they end up having to spend, millions in some cases to actually fix a customer experience that hasn't quite worked out the way it should do as they've grown. So yeah, I think, for an SME, if you're watching, there are so many things you can do now that will future-proof your business well into the long term.
Yeah, I totally agree, and it just sort of reminds me actually of something that our CEO Girish mentioned to me, and still we preach all the time around democratic design actually, and the fact that your products and offerings should be focused on your users and your agents or your staff rather than CEOs. And so often people are aiming at CEOs when actually they're not the users. They're not going to be actually using your product. They might sign a check at the end, but they're not actually using the product. So it's super interesting that. So have you got any examples then of how of some of these sort of customers that you're talking about, maybe that have got it right or got it wrong, so that we can put some perspective around?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think a really good example for someone who planned for that growth and who knew they were going to achieve that growth from early on is Octopus Energy. They have really run their business very differently from day one. I read an article the other day that said they don't even have an HR team. They just don't have one, because they basically empower all of their employees to know their rights, to know what they can do in a situation. They really invest in their management so that their people are looked after really, really well. And actually HR, which can sometimes be seen as the kind of bulldog there to protect the company, that's not really a thing for them. They just want to have a nice, inclusive environment. And I know quite a few people who work there, and they publish their complaint statistics for everybody to see on the internet all the time. They're very transparent, and they've just built a really clear business model that puts customers and employees right at the heart of everything they do. And they've done that from so early on that now they're huge, and they're winning all sorts of awards. And that's largely based on the kind of culture that they've grown from day one.
Yeah, I agree. So essentially they're giving their staff autonomy and empowerment, basically, to go and make decisions and to actually affect, the customer, putting the customer first.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that to me is so critical. If you can get your values and your culture and your staff right first, your customer experience will naturally benefit from that.
Yeah. And how would the likes of Octopus then actually measure the effect that they're having on their customers? How would they, sort of put a number or a figure or something around CX?
Yeah, and I don't know, I can't speak to how Octopus specifically do it. I haven't sort of sat in one of their meetings before to figure it out. But, I think for me, the thing that differentiates the businesses who are measuring customer experience in the right way versus those who potentially get a little bit lost are that the businesses who really do well are not focusing on a number. They're not focusing on statistics like what your NPS score is doing on a monthly basis. They are looking at the bigger picture. They're looking at their client retention. They're looking at their spend per customer. They're looking at things like staff attrition. And it's actually all about measuring those elements that can have such a massive impact on your customer experience, rather than trying to track just that one thing. If you track just your customer experience and you try and measure it with one number, the pitfall that you can end up with is that you're so focused on that number from month to month that you look at the one thing that might have detracted from that number in June, and you try and fix that one thing, but then 5 other things go wrong. And then in July, you're looking at those 5 things, but then 5 other things go wrong. And it really just stops you from taking a step back, looking at the wider picture and saying, okay, where are things going wrong? What can we do to make sure our customers are really, really happy? And actually, let's forget all about the numbers. Let's forget all about the metrics, because if we get all of these things right and in place, the numbers will take care of themselves.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, by the way. And one of my sort of pet hates actually is when people talk about deflection rates. People, customers or certainly prospects, clients that we've worked with before, who are looking for a deflection rate. Would like to deflect 50% of the tickets that come into the business. That to me doesn't feel like the right terminology, let alone the right sort of outcome. Because exactly as you say, okay, well let's deflect these 50, and we've won. But then how do the customers feel? How do those 50% of deflected customers feel about that experience? And I think it's so true. It's not just about one measurement. It's about how we, holistically deal with the situation. But with, and maybe we say we're aiming to reduce the number of tickets, or perhaps we say we're aiming to push more tickets through self-service because we're going to have an amazing world-class self-service system, for example. That might be a better way of looking at it. And then from the different angles of self-service.
It's a really interesting one, isn't it? And I think to this day, the conversation that I was involved in that shocked me most, coming from a customer experience practitioner and leader, was when I was working alongside a team to try and support them with a massive project that they'd just taken on. And actually, we were sat there talking about the call volumes coming in and the fact the call volumes were just too high coming into the contact centre. The contact centre was overwhelmed and it couldn't handle it. And they were talking about solutions. And this CX person said, look, we've already taken the phone number off the website. We're trying to make it as hard for them as possible to call us, but they're still calling in. No! And I was just like, do we know why they're calling? What's their problem? Could we just try and fix the problem? And maybe that's where we should start. But I think that's a really classic example of what happens when you're focusing on the wrong outcome. You're focusing on what's best for the business, not what's best for the customer, and not realizing that actually the two are really very much the same a lot of the time. Yeah,
exactly. I actually had a story recently where we'd been camping and we ordered a pizza delivery actually, and a similar thing happened. It was it was 3 hours later and the pizza still hadn't arrived basically, and unfortunately the business had taken so many orders they couldn't deal with it, and they couldn't communicate to their customers where the pizzas were or anything. And that's a kind of classic example, I think, of what you're talking about. Sort of plan correctly, don't take on too much, and then aim to try and to have a wow experience basically.
Absolutely. And I think, it can feel so counterintuitive at the time. It really can, especially if you're trying to grow your business. But one of our clients we worked with earlier on in the year is an accountancy business that's grown hugely over lockdown. And twice now in the last 12 months, they have said, we are pausing taking on any new clients, because what we want to do is make sure we have enough staff members to service those clients all to the highest possible standard. So we're happy to put you on a waiting list and we'll get to you as soon as we possibly can. But for us, delivering anything less than an A-star service is not an option. So we're going to just pause while we recruit, while we train, while we empower our teams. And that's definitely the way to build that long-term sense of satisfaction with your clients.
Yeah. And also to reassure your staff that that's your main intent as an organization, is to wow and please your customers basically. So we've spoken about the sort of right time to invest in SMB in CX, which is immediately and as soon as you possibly can as a business basically. But what do you think the first steps are to actually on that journey?
I think that's a really great question. And when we see things have gone wrong, it's normally because those first steps have been missed. Someone started to try and fix a customer experience just by looking at what happens with the customer. And actually, for me, the customer experience starts way before that point, and it starts with your values and with your culture in your organization. It starts with your team and your staff. So as you grow, when you start off as a one-man band, you'll have a really inherent, strong sense of what your values are, because they'll probably just mirror your own values. And that means you don't have to think too hard about the decisions you're making or how you respond to customer requests, because you just know what you want your business to look like. But as you grow and you take on your first 10 employees, and then that 10 employees becomes 100 employees, that's where there's room for those values to really get lost if they're not nailed down, communicated clearly, and actually lived every single day. It's not about having a values poster on the wall and saying, look, guys, that's what we want you to follow. It's about making sure that those values are actually echoed in everything. It's, when you answer the phone and you respond to a customer, was my response inspiring confidence? Did it live the values we want people to think of when they think of our business? Or actually, was it just, an individual giving the answer they thought might be best because they haven't really been trained and empowered to give that values-based answer? If you can nail down those values, nail down that culture as you grow, and you invest in a staff force that actually reflects that culture, then when it comes to your customer experience, any changes that you want to make, any improvements you want to make, you're actually already preaching to people who are on board. They know what you want to achieve. They're fully invested in that outcome, and it just makes the whole situation much, much easier.
Yeah, I agree. And interestingly, actually, so we have a culture code that we follow all the time, actually. So even as part of staff reviews and all hands, everything, we always talk about these our culture code. And actually, one of them was recently changed, and it quite interesting. It's just a very slight tweak, but it was previously agility through empowerment, which we thought, okay, that works. We want people to feel empowered to make decisions.
Mhm.
Actually, it's not just about the empowerment piece. So it's changed to agility through accountability, because actually we want people to be accountable for the changes that they make. And if we can make the accountability that, actually the customer comes first, we always want to make, the customer happy, then that's slightly different to just empowerment, isn't it? We sort of set the set the boundaries. So agility through accountability. I thought that was quite an interesting tweak.
Yeah, and I think if it's come off the background of being empowerment, then your team have everything they need to be accountable. They've been empowered already, so now they can be accountable.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, good. All right. So in terms of the resourcing and how we kind of set these people up, or set the staff and the company up for success, given that we're talking about values, team, and culture. Do we have like any advice, like a measurement perspective, how we sort of make sure that it's actually happening? How we make sure that the team understand it and believe it and are acting accordingly?
Yeah, so again, it sort of comes back to the wider measurement tools. So whenever we're working on a strategy, we will look at what the objectives are for the business, not just customer experience objectives, but the wider objectives of the business, what they're trying to achieve, and how the customer experience can then support them achieve that. And that will then remain one of the strongest measurements for us. Is, okay, are we on course to actually hit our main objectives? Has the customer experience done its part to achieve that? But it is really important to look at staff satisfaction, to look at staff retention. If you have a problem with sickness, so if you've got lots and lots of people calling in sick all the time, there is probably an issue. Slightly different at the moment, obviously, with the pandemic. It may well be they're having to call in sick when it's actually not their fault and they'd love to be at work. But essentially, if you've empowered your people, if you trust them so they can work from home if they need to, if you've really set them up for success and they're still calling in sick, that's a really strong indicator for me that something's gone wrong there and that your customer experience strategy will not work. Essentially, if you've got unhappy employees, you won't ever have really happy customers. You might have the odd happy customer, for sure. You'll have someone who says, look, I dealt with Luke last week. He was fantastic. He really set my world on fire. But it's not consistent, and that can be where things fall down. If it's not happening every single time, if every single customer doesn't have the same level of care, then you're going to have a problem in the long term as you grow.
Yeah, agreed. And then just to explore that piece around customers versus prospects, do you feel that this is part of an acquisition strategy, or is it part of a retention strategy, do you think, or something else?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for us, where we set ourselves up as a customer experience and sales consultancy, we've got the background behind both of those. My business partner was VP of sales for a FTSE 100 company. I've come in on the customer experience side. But the really lovely thing that we found very early on was we just see it the same way. We talk to our customers the same way. We absolutely look after customers, but it's not just as a customer interaction, it's as a relationship build. And I think even if you've got a very transactional business that you are expecting people to just come in, do a quick transaction, then leave again, if you can treat it as a long-term relationship build and you can treat them as someone that you're welcoming into kind of the family, welcoming into the business, then you'll find that you don't need to spend nearly so much money on marketing, because that customer will not only come back next time they have a transaction to make, but they'll shout to the rooftops about how amazing you were. And this is a question we often have thrown at us from people who don't necessarily want to keep customers. So there are some smaller industries, for example, counselling, where if you have a long-term customer, you've probably done something a little bit wrong. You actually want to be able to help them in a set time frame and send them on their way and hope that you won't need to have them back again. And so, we have people say, well, what do we do then? What are we trying to measure? But actually, you still want them to recommend you. You still want them to have loved what you've done for them so much that they're shouting to their friends, family, everyone about how much you've helped. So I think that, that's really, if you get it right, you won't have to spend as much money to acquire new customers. You won't have to replace the customers that you could potentially be losing. So in essence, customer experience should always be a money-saving exercise. And it shouldn't necessarily be something that wars with the budget for sales or the budget for marketing. It should just be kind of the three go hand in hand, really.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess there's a couple of sort of measurements. Certainly there's a measurement within Freshworks that we think about, which is net dollar retention, which is how do we, if we attract 10 customers, then over a period of time, how much are those 10 customers worth? Are they growing or shrinking? Yeah. And obviously we want the entire thing to grow, but at times you're going to see churn, you're going to see some downgrade, but it's how you can treat those customers well to keep that base growing if humanly possible, certainly in the SaaS world.
Yeah, and I think you'll always lose some customers. You know, there will be reasons why people leave. They may have just left the country. They may decide they don't need your product anymore. But it's about the avoidable losses. It's about minimizing the avoidable losses that could still be spending with you. And if they're not spending with you, hello, there's a cat in the background. If they're not spending with you, where have they gone? You know, if they're spending with your competitor, then that's an avoidable loss that you don't want to ever have to swallow up. And it's about making sure, firstly, that you track those. A lot of small businesses aren't tracking where the customers go. They don't track the sales they don't win. They don't track the customers that leave. They just let them go and sort of think, well, you know, they obviously had a reason for leaving. But actually, 9 times out of 10, you might well have been able to prevent that if you just ask the question, what happened? Where did we go wrong? What could we have done to make this experience a better one for you?
Yeah, completely agree with that. And just to come back to your earlier point around, you know, when is the best time to do this? Well, it's when a company is small, it's easier to measure those types of things, and you can get, you know, subjective measurements as well to sort of, you know, to try and help build the kind of how you're seen in the markets. So super interesting. Perfect. All right. Well, let's change pace then, shall we, and move on to the quiz if we can.
Yeah.
Awesome. So
I don't promise lots of whizzy answers here. I'm a huge quiz fan, but I also freeze under pressure. So let's see what happens.
So I have a feeling which score you're probably looking to try and beat, given that I don't know if everyone can see it. This is Dan's. This is Rebecca's husband came in with a score of 5. So we're looking for a score of 5 or more, I think, Rebecca.
But you know what? Knowing me, like, the score I would love to beat is James's, because I am very competitive. But I also think let's just be realistic. And if I can beat Dan, I'll be happy.
Okay, perfect. So for those that are just logging in today for the first time, so we run a quiz each time with a set of topical questions to our guests, and we run it for 90 seconds, and we'll see how we get on. So I'll also score so that we can measure at the end. Okay, are we ready?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, off we go. So question number 1. 70% of CX leaders struggle to design projects that increase customer loyalty. True or false?
Ooh, true.
True. Okay. Question number 2. 82% of customers are likely to repurchase or renew their business if they receive greater than expected value. True or false?
True.
In the UK, as of 2020, WhatsApp was the most popular application among people aged 26 to 35. True or false?
2020.
2020.
False.
Okay. Adidas has decided to sell which one of its footwear and clothing units to US company Authentic Brands Group in a deal worth just 2.1 billion euros.
Ooh. I don't know. Pass.
Reebok, actually.
I didn't even know that Reebok were owned by Adidas. That's terrible, isn't it?
Well, Reebok have been owned by a few different brands. We'll come on to that in a second. Right, question number 5. This person hurtled into space aboard his own rocket ship this Sunday, beating out fellow billionaire Jeff Bezos. Name this person.
Elon Musk.
No. Richard Branson.
God damn it. I knew it was one of the 3.
In the UK, SMBs generated 25% of their revenue during the pandemic through e-commerce. True or false?
Ooh. I'm going to say false. I'd have thought it would be higher.
Yeah, I'd have thought it would have been higher too, but apparently it's true.
Oh. I'm not doing so well, am I?
An average UK citizen spends almost 6 hours on the internet every day. True or false?
True.
Yes, 6 hours a day. Wow. Average as well, by the way. 95% of business
scary, isn't it?
Really scary. 95% of business leaders want to deliver a world-class CX, but most doubt if their strategy can. True or false?
True.
True it is. We're coming down to some very important questions here, by the way. What is the full form of CES?
Ooh. Customer Experience Survey?
Close. Customer Effort Score.
Oh, God, yeah. Oh, God.
Right. Last one. What is the term used to describe the percentage of customers that stop using a company's product or service during a certain time frame?
That stop?
Yeah.
I'm having a complete blank here. This is terrible.
Rhymes with burn.
Oh, churn, customer churn.
I had to give you that one.
Thanks for your help there, Simon.
It was quite an interesting score that you had at the time. So
okay,
so
you might have just helped me across the line, might you?
Wrap up here. So I'm just verifying that we had the right score between myself and one of the team, and we can confirm that you did actually score 5 points. So
okay.
you matched Dan. So that's a
little bit of help.
Well, maybe not. Yeah, but it's fun, isn't it? Mine suddenly goes blank for questions.
It really does. It really does. I'm not too concerned about that. I think it could have been worse. I could have been doing it live on the Chase and having millions of people watch. So
exactly.
I'll take that score.
Good. Right. So let's just go to the audience then, and just have a look at some of the questions. So I think what I can see, which is probably coming out here, is what are the basics versus what are the sort of advanced things that people can do. So let's just take the basics side of things. So as an SMB company looking to get onto the CX ladder, what are the first couple of rings or rungs that they can take? What are the basics?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this is critical, is that you do get those basics right. Don't aim for anything advanced or try to integrate anything that's kind of going to be a little bit more effort if you haven't got those basics right. And essentially, I think, for me, it starts with getting the values and the culture of your company nailed down. Write them down, think about what they are, and then review your processes to check that those are flowing through everything that you've got. Check that your employees even know what they are. And after that point, it's about listening. So make it as easy as possible for your customers to feedback in a way and at a time that's convenient for them. Get rid of your agenda, get rid of the company agenda. Just give them as many ways as possible to give you a little bit of feedback as quickly and easily as possible. Listen to that feedback. That is so critical. Look at what you're getting. Don't make any excuses for the feedback coming in. It can be really tempting when it's your business and when you're growing it and when you really care, to take feedback quite personally and to assume that the customer had an issue and that actually they just didn't understand what the service proposition was, or they had expectations that were never going to be reasonable. But actually, if you can listen and take ownership for every single piece of feedback that comes in and look at it really critically to say, okay, taking the customer out of the situation, we forget about this particular customer at this point in time. What could we as a business do to make sure we never receive that negative feedback again? What can we take ownership of? What can we explain more clearly? What can we demonstrate in an easier way to make sure we never have a customer that makes that misunderstanding again or thinks something differently to what they should do? And actually then take action. Feedback to customers to let them know that you've listened, to let them know what you're going to do, close that feedback loop. And start to implement on a really regular basis that scrutiny. So you're sitting down with your team, involve as many team members as possible to look at what your customers have said, why they've said it, and what you can do as a business to stop it from happening again if it's negative, or to increase it if it's positive. You want everybody feeling that way. What can we do to make sure that becomes the consistent way that happens normally? Yeah, I agree.
I actually have a saying within our team, actually, which is we either win or we learn. And so I've set up, this is mainly sort of from a sales perspective, but I've set up a lessons learned session where we be really internal looking here, and we say, look, what's actually happened. We obviously measure everything, but then specifically we take feedback, and actually I want my team to then go and speak to the client or prospect that we lost or we no longer work with, just to really understand it. What could we have possibly done differently? And this is not about pointing a finger. This is about, as an organization, what can we do going forward to make sure that we give a better experience?
Yeah, and you've literally hit the nail on the head there, Simon. It's not about pointing the finger. Too many businesses take that feedback and they use it to slap people around the head with, to say do better next time.
Yeah.
That stops people from even asking for feedback. They become afraid to kind of ask. So your whole team needs to know that no matter what the customer says, you're going to meet it as a team, you're going to take it head on, and you're going to say, look, it's no one's fault, but let's make sure we work together to stop that from being the same thing happening again.
Exactly. Awesome. So we're at the top of the hour, so we need to wrap it up. But it's been a fascinating talk, and I'm just going to sort of try and summarize if I possibly can here. So the best time to invest in CX is immediately, and as a small business, it's a great time to really ingrain this in the organization. We can ingrain it in organization through values, making sure the team are aware, and creating a culture of customer first.
Absolutely.
I think got a couple of points here around, do your employees actually know what your values are? Do they know what the right way to treat your customers? And then of course the final piece is just to say, customer feedback is absolutely vital. Doesn't matter whereabouts in the funnel they may have fallen out of the organization. We should still understand that and focus heavily on that part of the funnel to improve it going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Spot on.
Perfect. Good. Rebecca, thank you so much for all of your words of wisdom and advice, and for matching Dan in the quiz. You'll always be welcome back again, and best of luck with Think Well.
Oh, fab. Thanks so much for having me, Simon. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Take care. Thanks everybody
Bye.
for logging in. See you next time. Bye-bye.